This week I was given the wonderful privilege of being at St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church. They are considering the transition to becoming a part of Integrity, which would mean issuing a public statement affirming the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community. In order to consider this move, they invited Horace Griffin, a professor of pastoral theology at the Pacific School of Religion, which is where I did my doctorate, to speak about the history of the GLBT movement in the churches. Members spoke about their own experiences of the issue of either being GLBT or having a family member who is. It was a deep and affirming dialogue. The conversation made me proud to be the minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Livermore, which went through a similar process in the early 2000s. At the meeting, I was able to speak as the pastor of one of the only openly accepting churches in the Tri-Valley area. When I raised my hand to speak, I said that it felt like we were on holy ground with this conversation, that it was a conversation that mattered and that made a concrete difference to many people. I was able to speak about the number of people, of visitors, who have seen our rainbow flag or seen our welcoming status and showed up on Sunday because of that. In a context where many religious communities are not safe, they can be sure that we are. This coming week, on May 22nd, is Harvey Milk Day, celebrating the fallen leader of the gay rights movement. And so I spent time preparing by watching Milk, starring Sean Penn, and also reading Harvey Milk's writings. The film gives an appreciation for how much things have changed within the last generation. It starts by showing actual footage of police raids in gay bars. Police would flood into a bar and news crews would follow behind. People would be charged, their images shown, their names publicly released, and they would often lose their jobs and be ostracized from their families because of that. Harvey Milk had grown up in such a climate. He left his family's home in New York and moved to San Francisco, hoping to find a place that was more accepting. The film shows him at 40, lying in bed with his partner, saying that there was nothing he had done in his life that he was proud of. Milk had no idea what the next 10 years would entail for him. He started by opening a camera shop in the working-class Castro neighborhood in San Francisco. The business community told him right away that they would make sure that that store closed. They did not want his kind in the neighborhood. So Milk, instead of accepting defeat, got to organizing. He made one of the first lists of gay-friendly businesses and told the community only to shop there. This was so successful that in a few years, hostile businesses had to shutter their windows. More and more gay-friendly businesses moved in. It was at this time that Milk started to be called the mayor of Castro Street. But Milk was aware that being the mayor of Castro Street was in its own way ghettoizing. He wanted a wider influence beyond just the gay community. And so he ran for city supervisor. He lost twice. But on the third try, he became the first openly gay politician to be elected to public office. His election was a bright spot in an otherwise dark time in GLBT history. During the late 70s, Florida Orange Juice spokesperson Anita Bryant created a campaign to overturn an anti-discrimination ordinance in Dade County, Florida. It was called the Save Our Children campaign. A wave of anti-gay sentiment spread across the country. laws in Wichita, Kansas, and Eugene, Oregon were repealed that would have protected the GLBT community. Emboldened by these efforts, Bryant took her show on the road. Other evangelicals joined in. New measures were introduced, such as one to fire all gay and lesbian teachers immediately. That measure was introduced in California and was called Proposition 6. Harvey Milk had both been dreading the moment that kind of effort would come to California, and he was also looking forward to it. He viewed it as an opportunity to mobilize enough people to prove to the nation that these laws were not inevitable. It was during this fight that Milk came up with his major strategy for the gay rights movement going forward. He said that GLBT people had to come out. They had to tell their coworkers and their families and their friends. He all but required this of his campaign workers. His reasoning was based on statistics. People who knew even one gay or lesbian person were less likely to vote for anti-gay measures by a margin of 2 to 1. Those numbers were almost flipped for people who did not know a single gay or lesbian person. So this is part of the reason National Coming Out Day is celebrated. It's not only about the personal freedom of telling one's own truth, it's also about demystifying the GLBT community and building relationships that will sustain justice. It's about planting a seed that will bear virtuous fruits in unexpected ways. These seeds still need to be planted. I find that with a sermon on this subject, I can't set aside my own personal experience, which has been so shaped by the strength and the harsh realities of being gay in America. The same harsh realities that affected Harvey Milk were very much alive in Cincinnati when I was a teenager. Article 12, an effort to remove all anti-discrimination protection for GLBT people, was passed in 1993. I knew friends who were fired for being gay, and I knew which apartments would refuse to rent to me and my partner. Despite that, in so many ways, I was blessed. My parents accepted me wholeheartedly when I came out at 14. They were worried about the hardships I would face, but they supported me. The first group that I came out to was my Unitarian Universalist youth group. They also accepted me and loved me for who I am. Not many gay people can say that both their families and their churches were that accepting, and for that reason, I count myself one of the lucky ones. My husband was not so lucky. His family attended a Pentecostal church that often preached on the sinfulness of homosexuality. He grew up knowing who he was and told himself that he just had to survive long enough to escape. But his stepfather, an abusive and violent man, started to suspect that Jason might be gay when he was 17. And so one night, at 17, his stepfather came into Jason's room and asked him if he remembered the shotgun on the wall in his bedroom. Jason replied that he did. His stepfather told him that he was saving the bullets for him should he ever tell anyone that he is gay. Jason's heart was racing as he filled a backpack with clothes. He slipped out the window that night and never looked back, nor did his family ever reach out to him. When my husband died in an accident in 2007, not a single member of his family showed up for the funeral. Now, I could choose to be bitter about that, but mostly I'm just sad for them for missing out on the wonderful person that Jason became. I believe that they created their own personal hell and they chose to live in it. I just hope that one day their hearts can change and they can find healing. Harvey Milk is an inspiration to me, partly because he did not choose to live in bitterness and cynicism. Instead, he chose to make a difference. During the Proposition 6 fight, he mobilized his community to start coming out to their families. He began to form coalitions with other people who were fighting for justice. He also, and this is particularly inspiring, went into some of the most hateful and prejudiced places in order to publicly debate Anita Bryant's colleagues. I get an anxious pit in my stomach when I consider doing that, and I have a lot of respect for Milk's tenacity. As much as I admire that heroic activism, I think that the world is changed in much smaller gestures. In the passage from the Gospel of Mark that we read this morning, it says, if someone would scatter seed on the ground and would sleep and rise night and day, the seed would sprout and grow. The earth produces of itself first the blade, then the ear, then the full corn in the ear. When the grain is ripe, the harvest has come. My interpretation of this passage is that once you plant a seed, even a very tiny little seed, it starts to grow beyond what you can control. You can sleep and rise night and day, but that seed is going to keep growing no matter what you do. I think about justice and kindness and compassion as growing in that way. We each have the power to plant those little seeds that may grow into something beautiful beyond our expectations. Harvey Milk did not make it. He was shot by Dan White, who was then sentenced to 5 years in prison. Many look at it as a homophobic and unjust ruling. But the seeds that Harvey Milk planted continued to grow. He laid the groundwork for future activism, and I think it is no exaggeration to say that he saved thousands of lives through his work. We never know what is going to take hold and grow. We never know what is going to make all of the difference to someone. At the meeting this week at the Episcopal Church, one member shared that she was a teacher and that the issue of GLBT rights were dear to her. Once, she was the chaperone for a senior high prom, and this was way back in the late 80s. 2 male students saw her name on the list and came to her and asked if they would be able to go together. She said that she decided in that moment to take her stand, and she told them yes. She would accept whatever flack came her way over the decision. She just knew it was the right thing to do. Horace Griffin, who was facilitating the conversation, smiled, and he said to her, "And you could very well have saved their lives by doing that." It is in those small acts of heroism, those tiny seeds that we plant, that we can transform our world into a more just and loving place. My spiritual companions, may we go forward